Homeless woman finds a millionaire's wallet while looking for a job on the street. He fell madly in love. The chill of early winter clung to the streets of downtown Chicago like a second skin, and Emma Lewis wrapped her threadbare coat tighter around her small frame. She had mastered the art of walking with purpose, even when that purpose was simply to make it through another day. Her boots, once black leather, were now cracked and faded, their soles worn thin. But they still carried her forward, block after block, resume after resume. Every morning started the same. Wake up stiff from the cramped back seat of her rusted sedan, parked in a legal, overlooked spot between two forgotten buildings. Wash up with bottled water and paper towels in a public restroom. Run a comb through her auburn hair, tie it back, breathe deeply, then start walking. Emma had not always lived this way. Less than 2 years ago, she was a senior administrative assistant in a bustling office, respected by her team and praised for her organization and efficiency. But a perfect storm of misfortunes had upended everything. First, her mother's cancer diagnosis, which meant missed days of work and mounting medical bills. Then a layoff that came without warning. Her mother passed just 6 months later, and without income or support, eviction followed. She didn't tell anyone how close she had come to giving up in those first weeks. Shame clung tighter than the cold, but something deep in her wouldn't let go. She refused to let this be the final chapter. So she printed resumes at the library, always 10 copies, never more, because paper and toner were luxuries she couldn't afford to waste. She kept them in a manila folder, tucked into her satchel like precious documents. Downtown Chicago became her job market. She had a map in her head of every business lobby, temp agency, and office that didn't look too polished to take a chance on someone like her. She smiled when she handed out resumes, even when her cheeks ached from the effort. She told herself every day that someone, somewhere, would see her not as a homeless woman or a burden, but as a capable employee ready for a fresh start. That morning had begun like all the others. 7 o'clock found her sitting behind the wheel, rubbing her hands together for warmth, the heater broken and her breath fogging the windows. She had a list of places to visit: a dental office, a shipping company, 2 legal firms. She planned her route with precision, knowing the exact moments when receptionists would be least busy and therefore most likely to listen. She parked near a small cafe on North Wabash and stepped out, satchel over her shoulder. The scent of roasted coffee beans filled the air, mingling with the bitter bite of cold wind. Emma paused briefly in front of the glass window, looking in at the warm glow, the well-dressed customers tapping away on laptops or chatting over croissants. For a heartbeat, she was back in her old life. Then she turned, ready to move on. That's when she saw it. Near the curb, just inches from a storm drain, was a wallet, brown leather, thick, almost bulging. It looked untouched by the grime of the street, like it had just fallen seconds ago. Emma hesitated, her breath caught in her throat. She looked around. People were walking briskly past, heads down against the wind, no one paying it any attention. She bent down and picked it up, her fingers trembling slightly. She stepped to the side and opened it discreetly. Platinum credit cards, several business cards, and cash, more than she had seen in weeks. She counted quickly, then closed the wallet again. $300. Her heart pounded. Her eyes fell on the business card at the front. Sleek, embossed lettering, Nathan Carter, CEO, Carter Innovations. She recognized the name. His tech company had been in the news not long ago for launching a revolutionary medical software. This wallet belonged to someone important, someone powerful. She stood frozen for a moment, the weight of her situation crashing in. That money could buy food for weeks, gas, even a few nights in a cheap motel. It could make everything just a little easier. But her hands closed around the wallet with a firm grip. That wasn't who she was. She turned on her heel and walked. Her path now changed, not toward the dental office or the shipping company. She crossed 2 intersections, passed a sculpture garden, and arrived at a tall, glass-paneled building that seemed to shimmer even under the gray sky. Carter Innovations was etched in silver near the entrance. Emma took a breath, smoothed her coat, and stepped inside. The lobby of Carter Innovations was nothing like any place Emma had entered in a long time. The floors gleamed like polished onyx, and the walls were lined with sleek digital panels showcasing rotating displays of the company's latest innovations, healthcare platforms, artificial intelligence tools, energy-efficient biotech. There was a quiet hum in the air, the kind that spoke of success and control, of a world built far beyond Emma's current reality. She clutched the wallet tighter as she approached the front desk. The receptionist, a young woman with immaculate nails and a headset that curved around her cheek like jewelry, looked up with the kind of distracted efficiency that came from routine. Her gaze flicked over Emma's coat, then to her worn shoes, then back up to her face with a practiced neutrality. "Can I help you?" Emma offered a small smile, trying to steady her voice. "I found this on the sidewalk, just outside. It belongs to someone named Nathan Carter." The receptionist blinked, straightened slightly. "You found Mr. Carter's wallet?" "Yes. I saw the business card inside, and I thought I should bring it here directly." The woman's expression softened only marginally. She extended her hand. "I can take it and make sure it gets to him." "I'd prefer to return it to him in person if possible," Emma said gently but firmly. "It's a matter of principle." There was a moment's pause, a flicker of suspicion. Maybe it was her appearance, or maybe it was the unexpected request. Either way, the receptionist pursed her lips and tapped a few keys on her console. "I'm afraid he's in meetings all morning." Emma nodded. "I'll wait." "Ma'am, that could take—" "I don't mind." Another pause. The receptionist's eyes darted to a security guard near the elevator. Then, with a resigned sigh, she gestured toward a row of chairs near the window. "Suit yourself." Emma sat down, her back straight, the wallet resting on her lap. Time passed slowly. People came and went, most glancing her way with curiosity or polite discomfort. She kept her eyes on the large rotating sculpture outside the window, letting her thoughts drift. She wondered what kind of man Nathan Carter really was. She had read about him before, articles in tech magazines, interviews about his company's meteoric rise, photos of him shaking hands with politicians and appearing on panels. He had the kind of face that fit in with that world, clean-cut, confident, charismatic. But the man himself remained a mystery. Emma had always believed character revealed itself in small choices, the way a person treated strangers, the way they handled mistakes. A lost wallet, for example, might say more than any article could. 45 minutes passed, then an hour. At one point, a suited executive with a tablet walked by, glanced at her, and whispered something to the receptionist. Emma caught the words press and publicity stunt before they both looked away. She felt her cheeks flush but kept her gaze steady. She had made her choice. She would see it through. Finally, just as the city clocks ticked past 9:30, the elevator chimed and opened. A tall man in a navy wool coat stepped out, a phone pressed to his ear. He was speaking in quick, clipped tones, distracted, his brow furrowed. "Yes, have them push the deadline to Friday." "No, I don't care what the board thinks. I want the prototype safe, not rushed." The receptionist stood. "Mr. Carter." He raised a hand to pause her, still mid-sentence on the phone. Then his eyes landed on Emma. She rose to her, feet holding the wallet. Their eyes locked. Nathan ended the call abruptly. "Is that—" "I believe you dropped this earlier," she said simply, extending the wallet. He looked at her, then at the wallet, then back at her. Something flickered across his face. Relief, confusion, calculation. He stepped forward and took it from her hand slowly, almost cautiously. "Where did you find it?" "Outside the cafe. It was near the storm drain. You're lucky it didn't fall in." His eyebrows rose slightly. "You brought it all the way here?" Emma nodded. "It felt like the right thing to do." There was a beat of silence between them. He glanced down at the leather in his hand, then back up. "Thank you," he said, and his voice softened slightly. "That was incredibly honest of you." She nodded again, ready to turn and leave. But then he reached into the wallet, pulled out a few bills and extended them toward her. "Please, at least let me give you something for your trouble." Emma stiffened. Her eyes went from the folded bills to his face. "That won't be necessary. I insist." No. Her voice was calm but resolute. I didn't do it for money. He lowered his hand slowly, uncertain now. Then, can I at least offer you a cup of coffee? She gave a polite smile. I have a list of offices to visit today, thank you though. She turned before he could reply, walking out with the same determined grace she had entered with. Behind her, Nathan Carter stood still in the center of his sleek, modern lobby, holding the wallet he had nearly lost, and thinking, unexpectedly, about the woman who had returned it. Emma stepped back into the cold. She didn't look back, didn't second-guess her choice. There were still resumes to deliver, doors to knock on, hopes to carry through concrete streets. She moved forward, unaware that her path had already begun to change in ways she couldn't yet see. The sky had darkened with heavy clouds by the time Emma stepped into the warmth of the public library a few blocks away. Her fingers were numb, her legs ached from hours of walking, but her resolve remained untouched. She settled at a corner, table near the large windows, the manila folder with her remaining resumes resting carefully beside her. The encounter at Carter Innovations lingered in her mind, but she pushed it aside. It had been a moment, strange, brief, and already behind her. She used the library's computer to check email, most of which were either automated rejections or unread messages from job boards she no longer believed in. Still, she replied to each posting she had applied to, customizing every message with deliberate care. Her fingers moved fast, fueled by a mixture of habit and hope, despite the growing tightness in her chest. This wasn't the first day like this, and it wouldn't be the last. But she still believed that one response, one meeting, one chance could turn the tide. Outside, the first drops of rain tapped against the glass. Inside, Emma printed 5. More copies of her resume, her print quota nearly exhausted. She slipped them into her folder, folded her coat over her arm and left, choosing to walk instead of taking the bus. It gave her time to think, to feel, to let the city move around her while her thoughts stayed sharp. Her next stop was a law firm she hadn't tried before. The office was modest, tucked between a deli and a discount shoe store, and that gave her hope. It looked busy but not corporate. She stepped inside, greeted the receptionist with her usual practiced confidence, and asked to speak to someone about any open clerical or administrative positions. The woman behind the desk eyed her for a second, glanced at her folder, then asked for her resume. Emma handed one over, waiting. She had learned how to read faces. This one was neutral but not dismissive. We're actually looking for someone to cover the front desk for the rest of the week, the receptionist said after a pause. Our usual girl called in sick this morning. It's just answering phones and sorting mail. You'd be paid at the end of each day. Emma felt her breath catch. I'd be more than happy to help. The receptionist nodded slowly. We'll try you for the day. If all goes well, maybe longer. She was given a small workspace, a headset, and a quick rundown of the duties. Emma listened closely, absorbing every instruction with precision. She knew how to do this. In fact, she had done much more complex work in her previous role. But this wasn't about pride. It was about progress. By midday, she was answering calls with efficiency and a calm, professional tone. She logged mail deliveries, sorted packages, and managed walk-ins with polite ease. No one seemed to question her presence, and for the first time in weeks, she felt not just useful, but seen. During her short lunch break, she stepped outside with a peanut butter sandwich and sat on a bench facing the street. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a faint smell of asphalt and wet stone. She watched people pass, some in business suits, others in scrubs, all moving toward something. She wondered what Nathan Carter was doing at that moment, whether he had already forgotten about the woman in the oversized coat who refused his money. Her thoughts were interrupted by a familiar voice behind her. You again. Emma turned, startled. Standing a few feet away, dressed now in a simpler jacket and no phone in sight, was Nathan Carter himself. He had no entourage, no assistant, no polished distance. Just him, his expression unreadable, a hint of curiosity in his tone. She blinked. Are you following me? He gave a small smile. No. Well, maybe. I asked my assistant to find out who you were. She checked the lobby footage. Then I heard from someone that you were here for a trial shift. Emma stood slowly, sandwich forgotten. Why? Because I wanted to thank you again, and I wanted to apologize for earlier. I misjudged you. She crossed her arms, her expression guarded. You didn't know me. There wasn't anything to judge. I disagree, he said quietly. I think we all make judgments without realizing it. But what matters is what we do after. Emma didn't respond immediately. She was tired of games, of offers that came with conditions, of people who saw her only through the lens of their own expectations. Nathan continued, "Would you let me buy you coffee? Just a conversation, nothing more." She studied him for a moment. His voice lacked the polished tone of a CEO trying to be generous. There was something in his eyes, a kind of sincerity she hadn't expected to see again. After a pause, she gave a small nod. "Fine, one coffee. But I'm not quitting this job to take charity from a rich man with a guilty conscience." He laughed once quietly. "Fair enough." They walked down the street side by side. Not close, not comfortably yet, but not strangers either. Inside the cafe, the warmth hit immediately. They found a quiet corner. Emma ordered black coffee, Nathan chose tea. They sat, awkward at first, the silence between them crackling with the weight of two very different worlds trying to find a bridge. Emma spoke first. "So why me?" "I don't know," Nathan admitted. "Maybe because you didn't take the money. Maybe because you waited an hour to return something I didn't even know I'd lost. Or maybe because I'm tired of being surrounded by people who only do things because they want something in return." Emma sipped her coffee, watching him over the rim of the cup. "You're used to people chasing you every day." She tilted her head. "And now you're chasing me?" "I'm trying to understand you." She leaned back. "Good. Luck with that." He smiled. "I'll take it." Outside, the clouds shifted. The wind softened. Inside, something subtle began to shift as well. Neither of them said it, but both knew it. Something unexpected had begun. Something neither of them had planned. The next morning, the city woke under a dull grey sky, heavy with the threat of snow. Emma sat at her temporary desk inside the law office, answering calls and organizing files, doing her best to stay invisible and efficient. The warmth of the small space, the rhythm of task after task, gave her something she hadn't felt in a long time: stability, even if temporary. But her thoughts kept drifting back to the cafe conversation from the day before. Nathan Carter's presence had left more of an impact than she had expected. He had listened, not just nodded along politely. There had been no patronizing smiles, no corporate scripts, just honest curiosity. But even so, Emma had walked away unconvinced. She had spent too long being disappointed by people who acted one way when they wanted something and vanished when real hardship showed its face. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. By early afternoon, she was settled back at the front desk, focused on transferring a call when the glass doors swung open. She looked up, half expecting a courier or a client, but there he was again, Nathan Carter, walking into the law office like he belonged there, calm and collected, a briefcase in hand. Her throat tightened instinctively. She finished the call and stood. "What are you doing here?" He offered a polite nod. "I scheduled a meeting with one of your partners. I thought I'd stop by and say hello." Emma narrowed her eyes. "You expect me to believe that?" He raised his eyebrows. "Would it be better if I said I made an excuse just to see you again?" "Probably not," she replied flatly. Nathan paused, adjusting the strap of his briefcase. "Fair enough, but I meant what I said yesterday. I want to get to know you, not for any hidden reason. Just because you surprised me." Emma gestured toward the seating area. "You're welcome to wait for your appointment over there." "I was hoping for 5 minutes of your lunch break." She hesitated. Her instincts told her to say no to guard what little peace she had built in the last 24 hours. But another part, one quieter, more curious, told her there was no real harm in talking again. She checked the clock. "Fine. 5 minutes." They stepped outside together, the cold biting more sharply than the day before. Emma pulled, her coat tighter, and led the way to a bench sheltered by the building's awning. They sat silent, stretching between them, until Nathan finally broke it. "I didn't know you were struggling," he said softly. "When I saw you in the lobby, I assumed you were someone looking for a handout. That was wrong." Emma stared straight ahead. "You don't owe me an apology." "I do. Not because I feel guilty, but because I misread you. That's not something I'm used to." She turned to face him. "People see someone in an old coat and second-hand shoes and they assume weakness, laziness, maybe even a scam. You wouldn't be the first. I've lived in a world where everything is curated, where everyone wears masks and no one ever says what they really mean. You were different." Emma shook her head slowly. "Don't romanticize my life. There's nothing noble about sleeping in a car and hoping your battery doesn't die overnight." Nathan didn't respond. Immediately, his hands were bare despite the cold, resting on his knees, still and open. "I'm not trying to romanticize anything. I'm trying to understand how someone like you stays that honest in a world that isn't." Emma let out a breath, her voice softer. "Because if I stop being honest, I lose myself. And I've already lost enough." They sat quietly for a moment. Around them, the city moved with its usual indifference. People rushed past, heads down, wrapped in scarves and insulated lives. No one noticed the quiet conversation between the woman in the worn coat and the man in the tailored suit. "You know," Nathan said finally, "people will keep making assumptions, that I'm chasing some story, that you're chasing opportunity." Emma gave a humorless chuckle. "Let them talk. They always do. But you care." She didn't answer. "You want a job on your own terms. You want your life back the way you earned it before. No shortcuts." "That's right." Nathan studied her for a moment, then nodded. "I can respect that. And I promise not to get in your way." "Then why are you here?" His answer came without hesitation. "Because I think you're worth knowing, even if you never believe that I mean it." Emma looked at him again, this time really looking. There was something in his expression, stillness, not desperation. He didn't seem like someone who was offering salvation. He seemed like someone trying to earn a place in a story he didn't expect to find himself in. She stood up. "Your 5 minutes are up." Nathan smiled, standing with her. "I'll see myself in." She watched him walk back into the building, disappear into the hallway. When she returned to her desk, the receptionist leaned over. "Isn't that Nathan Carter?" she whispered. "The tech guy?" Emma kept her voice even. "I think so." The rest of the day passed with mechanical rhythm. Calls, deliveries, client sign-ins. Emma did her work without faltering, but inside, something had shifted. Not because of his attention, but because of what it reminded her. People weren't always who you expected, and not every offer came with strings attached. Still, she didn't let her guard fall. One conversation, even two, didn't change the facts. She still had no home, no long-term job, no real safety net. She couldn't afford to believe in kindness that came too easily. But she could allow herself one thing, a flicker of possibility. That night, in the driver's seat of her parked car, she replayed the day. She thought about his face when he said she was worth knowing. She wondered if he really believed that, or if he was trying to convince himself. But then she thought about his silence, about the way he didn't push when she turned away, and that more than anything left her unsure. She closed her eyes and let the quiet fill the space. Outside, the wind scraped against the glass. Inside, for just a moment, her breathing slowed. Something had begun, and whether it turned into something real or faded into another memory, Emma knew she would face it like she faced everything else, with eyes open, spine straight, and both feet firmly on the ground. The sun hadn't yet risen when Emma stirred inside her car. Condensation clung to the windshield, blurring the city skyline beyond the cracked glass. She wiped a corner clear with the sleeve of her coat, just enough to peek outside. Another day, another chance. The aches in her back were sharp after another restless night curled in the driver's seat, but she moved carefully, trying not to spill the cup of coffee she had saved from the law office the day before. It was cold now, but still something. She brushed her hair quickly using the rearview mirror, pulled on a fresh shirt from the duffel bag on the back seat, and stepped out. The air was still and bitter. Her car sat in a side street near an elementary school, one of the few places where the police rarely checked for overnight parking violations. She never stayed in the same place 2 nights in a row. Routine meant risk. People noticed routine, and when people noticed, trouble followed. Despite everything, she kept to her schedule. By 7 o'clock in the morning, she was on her way to the law office again, walking briskly, trying to beat the worst of the traffic. Her second day there felt easier, the environment less alien. She smiled when clients entered. She handled the switchboard with more ease. Even the receptionist, who had first regarded her with indifference, now nodded politely, perhaps recognizing something useful in Emma's quiet presence. But as the hours passed, something else gnawed at her. It wasn't the work. It was the feeling of standing on borrowed ground. The job wasn't permanent. The paycheck was daily. No promises, no stability. If the regular receptionist returned tomorrow, she'd be thanked and sent on her way. It wasn't unkindness. It was just the reality of temporary work. During her afternoon break, she sat on the office steps with a paper cup of tea. She stared down at the sidewalk, thinking about everything she had done to survive in the past 6 months. There had been a brief gig cleaning a warehouse overnight, where she was paid under the table and let go after 3 days. Another job, answering phones for a storage company that shut down the week she started. None of it lasted. None of it had led to anything better. Still, she had refused to disappear. Every morning, she returned to the city's pulse, walked past towers of steel and glass with a folder in her hand and hope in her step. People didn't know what it cost to keep going. They saw only the clothes, the fatigue, the shadows under her eyes. They didn't know about the nights spent worrying whether the car would be towed or how she rationed toiletries from shelters. They didn't know how many times she'd walked into interviews, smiled and left without even a glance of interest. And yet, she persisted. Later that evening, when her shift ended, she stopped by the grocery store. Not for food. She couldn't afford much more than a loaf of bread and a few bananas, but for warmth, for the bright aisles that made her feel briefly normal. She lingered near the magazine rack, scanning headlines, watching families shop. Together, the hum of domestic life surrounding her like a window she couldn't step through. As she stood there, she felt someone behind her, a quiet presence, familiar. She turned and found Nathan Carter again. He didn't speak right away, just nodded in greeting, a brown paper bag of groceries in his hand. "I'm not following." "You," he said, preempting her suspicion. "I live a few blocks away, just saw you here by chance." Emma didn't reply immediately. She wasn't sure whether to believe him, but something in his tone felt uncalculated. "Did you finish your meetings?" she asked finally. "Hours ago. I just got back from the office." She glanced at the bag. "You cook?" "I try," he said. "Badly." That drew a faint smile from her, and she started walking toward the exit. He followed, matching her pace. "You didn't show up at the cafe this morning," he said. "I don't remember saying I would." "No," he admitted, "you didn't." They reached the sidewalk. The cold was deeper now, the streetlights flickering on one by one. "I won't keep you," he added. I was wondering if you'd let me ask a personal question." Emma stopped. "You can ask. Where do you go when you're not working?" She hesitated, not out of fear, but calculation. Trust was earned in pieces. "Nowhere special." Nathan nodded, not pressing. "If I gave you my number, would you use it?" "Why?" "In case you ever need anything, not money, just help." She looked at him for a long moment, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a pen. She scribbled a number on the edge of a receipt and handed it to him. "I won't call," she said, "but I'll let you have mine." Nathan accepted it with a quiet nod. "Good night, Emma." She watched him go. No promises, no speeches, just footsteps on pavement, fading into the night. When she returned to her car, she sat in silence for a while. She looked at the dashboard, at the clutter of survival, maps, wrappers, extra socks, a flashlight. She rested her forehead against the steering wheel and let the silence settle. She hadn't told him where she slept. She hadn't told him about the library lot or the empty parking garage she sometimes used when it was too cold for the street. But the question had cracked something open inside her. Not a door, not yet, but a window. That night she didn't dream, but she felt something different when she closed her eyes. Not safety, not hope, just a little less alone. Emma's fourth day at the law office began with the comfort of repetition. The morning walk beneath a low grey sky, the receptionist's faint nod of acknowledgement, the phone ringing sharply at exactly 8 o'clock. She had learned the rhythm of the place, and it soothed her. Routine was a kind of protection. Every moment followed the last with steady predictability, and in that predictability, she found temporary calm. She moved with quiet purpose through the morning, answering calls, filing documents, and preparing coffee for a partner who never once looked her in the eye. It didn't matter. She wasn't here to be seen, only to earn the day's wages and leave no footprint. Just after noon, as she took her first real break of the day, she heated a packet of instant noodles in the tiny office kitchen. The microwave buzzed softly behind her as she stared out the window at the street. Already planning her next moves, an employment agency nearby, a dry cleaner rumored to be hiring, maybe even the temp agency she had already tried twice. She returned to the front desk to eat quietly. That was when the door opened. At first she thought it was a delivery. The receptionist had stepped away, and Emma rose instinctively. But as she glanced toward the entrance, her breath hitched. Nathan Carter was standing in the lobby. He wasn't in a suit this time, just a dark wool coat and gloves, and a look that was something between polite curiosity and quiet determination. For a second she said nothing, unsure if what she was seeing was real. "Emma," he said with a small nod, "can I borrow you for 5 minutes?" She didn't move. Not immediately, but after a moment's pause she gestured toward the door. Outside, they stepped into the cold, the wind sharp and loud against the nearby buildings. Nathan adjusted the collar of his coat and stood with his hands in his pockets. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said. "I just wanted to apologize again." "For what now?" she asked, arms crossed. "For showing up at the grocery store. I know it probably felt intrusive." She gave a faint shrug. "You've done worse." Nathan smiled slightly. "Fair, but I wanted to talk to you, not chase you down, so I came with a better offer." Emma arched an eyebrow. "What now?" "Lunch, just a conversation. My treat. No lectures, no proposals." She hesitated. Her instinct was to say no, but something in his voice was different, calmer, less certain. And something in her chest, some subtle pull of curiosity, told her it might be worth hearing him out. "There's a coffee shop on the next street," she said. "It's quiet. I'll be there in 15 minutes. He nodded. Wait." She returned inside, dumped her barely touched lunch, grabbed her coat and left 10 minutes later. When she arrived at the cafe, he was already seated at a small table in the back, 2 cups of coffee between them. She sat across from him, wrapped her hands around the warm ceramic and looked him in the eye. "You wanted to hear something, then listen." And she spoke. Not everything, not yet, but enough. She told him about her mother's illness, about quitting work temporarily to care for her, about losing her job and the rapid spiral that followed. She told him about the eviction, the nights in the car, the way friends disappeared once her life stopped looking like theirs. She spoke with the voice of someone who had repeated these facts in her head 100 times, but rarely said them aloud. Nathan didn't interrupt. He asked no questions for a long while. He simply listened with an intensity that unsettled her and calmed her all at once. "You had a life," he said finally, "and then it disappeared." "I had a plan," she replied. "It wasn't extravagant, but it was mine. And now I wake up every day reminding myself I still matter, that I'm not invisible." "You're not," he said quietly, "not to me." Emma looked away. "You say that because you're sitting across from me with a warm coat and a house to go home to, but you didn't see me last winter when I thought I was going to freeze in a parking garage." He didn't flinch. "And I never will understand what that was like, but I want to know more than the headline version of you. You're not a story I can fix." "Good," she said, sharp but not unkind, "because I'm not here to be rescued. I'm not here to rescue anyone." They drank their coffee in silence for a few moments. Outside, the wind bent tree branches and scattered paper through the gutters. Inside, The air between them had changed. No longer the push and pull of suspicion and pride. Something quieter now, something unsure. "People will talk," she said at last, "if you keep showing up like this." "They always talk," he replied. "But I'm not trying to impress anyone. I'm just trying to show you that I see you." Emma looked down at her hands, the pale line across her knuckles where her gloves had worn through. "Most people look away when they see someone like me." Nathan's voice was steady. "I didn't." "No, but it took you a minute. And I've regretted it every day since." She met his eyes again. This time, something softened. Not trust, not yet, but an opening. "I have to go," she said, rising. "Thanks for giving me this time." "I didn't do it for you," she said. "I needed to say it out loud. For me." He didn't try to follow as she left. She walked back to the office in the same direction she'd come, but her steps felt different, not lighter, just more grounded. Like the truth she had finally spoken had anchored her in the present. The rest of her day unfolded in its usual rhythm, calls, clients, signatures, but her mind wandered. Not to fantasies, not to hope, but to the strange feeling that maybe, for once, she had been heard. It was early Saturday afternoon when Emma arrived at the cafe again, this time not out of obligation or caution, but choice. She had told herself it would just be another conversation, nothing more, and that she was going only to be polite. But the truth, quiet and undeniable, was that she was curious. Not about Nathan Carter, the CEO, not about the man with too much money and too many people saying yes to him, but about the strange way he kept returning. Not chasing, not demanding, just returning. She pushed open the glass door, scanned the tables, and found him in the same corner they had used before. He was already there, no phone in sight, a cup of coffee growing cold in front of him. When he looked up and saw her, there was no smile of triumph or relief, just acknowledgement, as if he'd been sitting there not expecting her but still hoping. Emma sat down quietly. "I didn't think you'd come," he said. "I didn't think I would either," she answered. They didn't speak for a moment. The quiet between them wasn't awkward anymore. It was full of potential, like the pause before a new chapter begins. Nathan leaned back slightly in his chair, arms crossed. "You know, you keep surprising me." "I'm not trying to," Emma said, sipping the tea she had ordered on the way in. "That's what makes it even more surprising." She raised an eyebrow. "Are you trying to flatter me now?" "No, I think I'm just trying to figure you out." "Why?" "Because the moment I think I understand you, you show me a different side. Like how you showed up today." Emma considered that. "I don't owe you consistency." "No, you don't," he said without missing a beat. "But I still want to understand what drives you." She looked at him carefully. "Maybe it's not drive. Maybe it's survival." "I believe you, but survival looks different on everyone. On you, it looks like discipline, focus, pride." Emma set her cup down. "It also looks like hunger and exhaustion, and waking up every morning knowing I have to start over." Nathan nodded slowly. "That sounds like strength to me." Emma looked out the window at the people walking past. Families, couples, people laughing, people hurrying. All of them moving through lives that didn't include nights in parked cars or days handing out resumes to people who never looked up. "I'm not interested in being inspirational," she said finally. "I'm not a story you tell at a fundraiser. I'm just trying to get through the week." "I know," Nathan replied, "and that's what makes me want to keep talking to you." He paused, then added, "I've met a lot of people who want to change the world. They're full of big ideas and shiny words, but most of them couldn't survive one day of what you're living." Emma's voice dropped. "You say that like you know what this life feels like." "I don't. I've had my share of setbacks, but nothing like what you've been through. And maybe that's why I'm here, because you make me question how much I really understand about the world." She tilted her head. "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" "I think it's the best thing." They sat in silence again. Nathan finally leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his voice lower. "Can I ask you something personal?" Emma gave a small nod. "Is there anyone in your life, right now, who knows what's really going on with you? Who knows the truth about where you sleep, What you're facing. She hesitated, then shook her head. No, not anymore. No family? Not since my mother passed. No siblings. My father was never around. A few friends before things fell apart. But people disappear when your life stops matching theirs. Nathan's jaw tightened slightly, but he said nothing. Emma continued, "It's easier this way. No one to disappoint, no one to explain things to, but also no one to lean on." She nodded slowly. "I want to offer something," Nathan said carefully. "Not a job, not money, just with an ear. If you ever need to talk, even if it's about nothing, even if it's just to remind yourself you still have a voice." Emma studied him, unsure whether to be grateful or suspicious. "Why?" she asked again. "Because you listened to me when I was a stranger with a lost wallet, and you didn't want anything in return. You reminded me what honesty looks like. That's rare. I don't want to lose that." She looked away, her eyes lingering on the smudged reflection in the cafe window. "I don't know what you're looking for, Nathan, but I don't want to be another interesting chapter in someone else's story. I've been background for too many people already." "Then maybe it's time someone joined yours." The words hung in the air longer than either expected. Emma leaned back, folding her arms. "I'm still not sure I trust you." "You shouldn't, not yet. But you're still here." "I am." She watched him a moment longer, then gave a slow nod. "All right. Let's see what happens when two people sit down and just talk." They stayed for nearly an hour after that. They didn't talk about homelessness or success or trauma. They talked about books, about movies, about childhood memories that had nothing to do with pain. Nathan told her about a dog he'd rescued when he was a teenager. Emma told him about her old bike and how she used to ride it at night just to hear the tires hum on the pavement. The conversation shifted from heavy truths to small joys, and in those simple exchanges, a new kind of understanding began to form. When they finally stood to leave, neither of them said anything about seeing each other again. They didn't make plans or promises, but there was something different in the way they said goodbye, an unspoken agreement that this wasn't over. And as Emma walked back toward the lot where her car waited, she didn't feel lighter exactly, but she felt steadier, seen, not as a cautionary tale, not as a symbol of resilience, just as Emma. The following Monday came with a quiet snowfall that blanketed the streets in silence, the kind of snow that slowed everything down and made the city feel suspended in time. Nathan arrived at Carter Innovations early that day. Though he hadn't slept much, he kept checking his phone, expecting a message that never came. Emma had stopped answering. He had sent her a short text the day before, something simple, just asking if she was all right, if she wanted to meet. Again. No pressure, no expectations. He hadn't expected an instant reply, but when night came and still nothing, he sent another. Still silence. That silence grew heavier by the hour. By the time noon arrived on Monday, he couldn't focus on the pile of reports on his desk. He stared out the window of his office, the skyline blurred by falling snow, and thought about the way she had walked away from the cafe 2 days earlier. Calm, thoughtful, present. Nothing in her body language had hinted at distance or withdrawal. There had been no goodbye, no final words, just a pause in the conversation that felt like the start of something, not the end. Still, Emma was gone. Nathan reached out to the law office where she had been working as a temp under the pretense of a business follow-up. The receptionist answered and casually mentioned that Emma hadn't returned since Friday. She didn't call in. "We just assumed she moved on," she added. "Did she say anything before leaving Friday?" he asked. "Not really. She thanked us and left, like usual. Seemed tired, but nothing unusual." Nathan ended the call with a deepening frown. He leaned back in his chair and ran both hands down his face. He wasn't someone who panicked easily. In his world, problems were solvable. Issues could be managed with the right resources. But this wasn't a technical failure or a business risk. This was a person who had quietly slipped from view, and the weight of that realization hit him harder than he expected. He went back through the last messages he had sent her, none of them demanding, none insistent, Just small, steady reminders that he was still around, still listening. But Emma had vanished before, he reminded himself. She lived in the margins of the city, where disappearing could happen without effort. All it took was one bad night, one hostile encounter, one mechanical failure in a car that doubled as a home. By evening, Nathan had tried everything within his immediate reach. He called the employment agency she had once mentioned, but they hadn't heard from her either. He drove past the library lot where they had met before, parked discreetly, and waited. The snow kept falling, soft and indifferent, coating the cars and benches in a uniform layer of white. She didn't show. The next morning, he returned to the same spot, this time earlier. He sat in his car, hands wrapped around a coffee he barely sipped. Hours passed. He watched every pedestrian, every car. He questioned his own sanity, what he was doing, why it mattered so much. But every time he thought of leaving, he saw her face in his mind, calm, proud, stubborn, and he stayed. On the third morning, just as the sun broke faintly through the clouds, he saw a shape he recognized. Emma's car. It turned slowly into the lot, creaking slightly, and rolled into a spot near the far end. He waited until she stepped out, wrapped in her coat, her hair pulled back. She didn't look around. She moved with the weariness of someone who had not slept well, who carried a private burden like a second skin. Nathan stepped out of his own car quietly and walked toward her. When she noticed him, she froze. Emma. She didn't speak immediately. Her eyes narrowed, not in surprise, but in something closer to defensiveness. What are you doing here? I was looking for you. That's not your job. I wasn't doing it as a job, he said. I was worried. She looked away, then back. You shouldn't be. You disappeared. I do that sometimes. Why? She exhaled, brushing a hand through her hair. Because it's easier. Because sometimes it feels like talking to anyone is a risk I can't afford. Even me? Especially you. Nathan stepped closer, slowly. What happened? Nothing dramatic, she said. I just hit a wall. I was tired. I had $20 left. My phone was almost out of service, and I realized I didn't want to explain that to someone who can buy buildings. He didn't flinch. So you vanished. Emma crossed her arms. It's how I survive. I get that. But do you want to keep surviving like this forever? She stared at him. The question was not an accusation, but it stung anyway, because it forced her to face something she tried to avoid, how exhausted she really was, how close she had come that weekend to just stopping altogether. No plans, no more resumes, just silence. I don't know what I want, she said finally. I think you do, he replied. I don't want to be pitied. I don't want to be someone you find and help and feel better about later. And I don't want to be someone who only shows up when it's convenient. I'm here because I choose to be, not out of guilt, out of respect. Emma closed her eyes for a moment, gathering herself. You have a life, Nathan. A clean, organized, brilliant life. Why are you wasting time chasing a woman who lives in her car? He didn't hesitate. Because you're not a waste of time. The air between them held steady, tense and open. I need space, she said softly. I'll give you space, but not distance. She didn't answer right away, but she didn't walk away either. Nathan took a step back, hands in his pockets. I'll be around. When you're ready. Then he turned and walked toward his car, not looking back. Emma stood there long after he left. The snow had stopped. The city moved around her, unaware, uninterested. But something had shifted again, not in what was said, but in what was left unsaid. This time, she hadn't disappeared to escape him. She had disappeared to escape herself. And now, she wasn't so sure she could. 2 days passed. Nathan didn't text her again. He didn't call, didn't drive by, didn't appear outside her car like a man chasing a cause. Instead, he gave her what she had asked for, space. And in that space, Emma found herself confronted by a silence she had carefully built and now couldn't ignore. The city resumed its rhythm, indifferent to her struggle. Emma moved through it with a practiced stillness. She returned to the job search, though without urgency. Her energy came in waves, brief, flickering. Each morning she still printed resumes, still walked to businesses and temp offices, but the motions felt thinner now, as if some part of her spirit was lagging behind. She didn't want to admit it, but Nathan's words had stayed with her. Not the flattering ones, or even the promises. Just the simple, steady presence of someone who hadn't walked away even after she pushed. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't poetic. It was real. And that, more than anything, unsettled her. By the third day, she stopped at the public library. It was the same branch she had used for months, her temporary office, her safe space. There was comfort in the routine. The librarian with the silver hair who never asked questions, the dusty smell of books, the hum of printers, the peace of being among people who simply let her exist. That day, Emma sat at the farthest table, laid out her notes, and opened the library's Wi-Fi portal. Her phone had stopped accepting calls. She couldn't afford to reload service, but she still had limited data access on public networks. She opened her inbox. It was full of system messages, most unread, but buried deep in the pile was a subject line that made her pause. Emma Lewis, follow-up request. It was from a law office. Not the one she had worked at briefly, but one she had interviewed with almost a month ago and never heard back from. The email was dated the previous morning. They were offering her a second interview. A full-time position was opening up. She read it 3 times to be sure. Then again. A full-time role. Entry-level, yes, but permanent, stable, with benefits. She could hardly breathe. She checked the time. If she left immediately, she might make it there before closing. She gathered her things with a kind of practiced swiftness, her coat pulled tight, her satchel heavy with hope for the first time in weeks. But as she passed the circulation desk, the librarian looked up. "Emma," she said, her voice soft. "Someone was asking about you earlier this week." Emma froze. "Who?" "A man. Tall brown coat, soft voice, said he was a friend. I didn't give him much, but I mentioned you come here sometimes. He said he'd wait in the lot." Emma stood completely still. "Was he still here?" The librarian nodded slowly. "He waited for hours, then left. But something about the way he waited, he wasn't just being polite, he was hoping." Emma looked toward the door. For some reason, her breath caught. Not from fear, but something quieter. A thread. Thin and invisible. A line that had held when she thought it would break. She went to the parking lot. He wasn't there now. Just a few empty cars, the wind stirring the leaves. But she could picture it clearly, him sitting in his car, watching, waiting, not out of desperation, just presence. She stood there for a long time, then pulled out her phone. She tapped out a message, brief, unsure if it would even go through given her lack of service. "I heard you waited at the library." She didn't expect an answer. She started walking again, back into the cold, into the crowded streets, toward the address in the email. The law office was in a modest building, tucked between a dry cleaner and a pawn shop. She climbed the stairs quickly and found herself in a waiting area that smelled of paper and old carpet. The receptionist, a young man with a tired smile, looked up. "I'm here for the interview," she said, breathless. He nodded. "Ms. Lewis, we've been expecting you." An hour later, Emma left the building with a tentative job offer and a document to sign the next morning. She could hardly believe it. She would be starting within the week. But the moment she stepped outside, her phone vibrated. It was a message. "I did wait. I didn't know if I should, but I hoped you'd come back." Emma stared at the screen, her pulse suddenly loud in her ears. She didn't reply immediately. She walked in silence, letting the city wrap around her. This time, though, she didn't feel lost in it. There was a thread pulling her through, faint but real. That night in her car, she didn't close the curtains like she usually did. She left the front windshield uncovered, the city lights spilling in like distant stars. And she wrote him back. "I'm still figuring things out, but thank you for not disappearing." She turned off the phone, pulled the blanket over her shoulders, and stared at the glow on the ceiling. She wasn't safe yet. She wasn't stable. But something had shifted. She had found a thread to the past, through him. And now maybe she could begin pulling her way forward. The next evening came with a brittle wind that scraped against the streets like a warning. Emma sat in the front seat of her car, the paper from the law firm resting on her lap. Her name was printed neatly across the top of the page. The position offered was modest, administrative assistant, probation period of 90 days, but the weight it carried was immeasurable. It represented something she hadn't held in a long time, a door not halfway open, but wide enough to walk through with both feet. She stared at it in silence. Her phone buzzed once, then twice. She picked it up, expecting another automated message from a job board. Instead, it was Nathan. "Still at the cafe for the next hour if you're near." She looked out the window. The city was winding down. The sky above had faded to the color of steel. The roads were slick with melted snow, and every shadow seemed stretched just a little longer. She didn't answer the message, but she started the engine. 15 minutes later, she stood outside the cafe door, watching him through the glass. He was seated in the same corner as always, coat draped over the chair beside him, his hand cradling a mug of tea. There was no visible tension in his posture, but he wasn't relaxed either. He was waiting the way someone waits when they're not sure if they've already lost the thing they're hoping for. Emma opened the door, the bell chiming above her, and walked toward him. His eyes lifted, surprised but calm. He didn't smile. He just nodded and stood, pulling the chair out for her before sitting again. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said quietly. "I wasn't either." They sat in silence for a few seconds before Emma set the paper from the law office on the table between them. "I got the job," she said. "Full time. I start next week." Nathan looked at the paper, then at her. "You did it." "I did. On my own." His expression didn't change. "I never doubted that you could." Emma let out a breath. "That's why I'm here." He tilted his head. "To tell me?" "To say everything I've been holding back." She placed both hands on the table, steady. "I've lived the last year trying not to break. Every day felt like balancing on the edge of something I didn't know how to name. I've gone to sleep afraid I wouldn't wake up. I've woken up afraid that I would. I've learned how to go invisible in a world that doesn't want to. See people like me." Nathan listened, not moving. "And then I met you," she continued. "And I didn't trust you, not really. You were too polished, too kind. And when people are that kind, they usually want something." "I didn't," he said. "I know. That's what scared me." Emma's voice softened, but didn't lose its edge. "You kept showing up, not to fix me, not to pity me, but to stay. And I didn't know what to do with that. I still don't. But I need you to know that if I pull away, it's not because I don't see you. It's because I don't know how to be seen by someone like you." Nathan leaned forward slightly. "Someone like me. Someone who has choices, security, a reputation that isn't built on failure. You're the kind of man people believe before you even speak. I'm the kind of woman people ignore even when I'm screaming." He didn't speak for a long moment. Then, quietly, "That's not how I see you. I know. And that's the part I can't ignore anymore." She reached for her tea, took a slow sip. It was quiet now. The few other patrons had left. The cafe was dim, the lights above them soft, as if the space itself understood something important was being said. "I don't want to be someone you remember for being honest that one time," she continued. "I don't want to be a good deed you carry around. If you're here, if you keep being here, I need to know it's because you want to be part of this story, not just someone who watched it from the outside." Nathan nodded once. "I do, but only if you want me here." Emma looked at him, the weight of that offer settling into the space between them. It wasn't a proposal, it wasn't even a promise. It was a statement, a truth without demand. She leaned back slightly. "Then let me say this clearly. I'm not a project. I'm not an investment. And I'm not going to let anyone turn my life into something neat and beautiful for their conscience." "I wouldn't ask you to," Nathan said, "but I will ask one thing." "What?" "Let me be beside you when the beautiful parts finally come. Not because I helped build them, just because I believed they were possible." Emma stared at him. Not a flicker of doubt crossed his face, only quiet resolve. She shook her head slowly, a breath of something between disbelief and acceptance slipping from her lips. "You're either incredibly naive or exactly what I needed and didn't know how to ask for. Maybe both." They sat like that for a long time, no declarations, no confessions. Just two people finally laying bare everything that had been caught beneath the surface. Fear, pride, pain, and the beginnings of something that couldn't yet be named. When she left the cafe that night, Nathan didn't walk her to her car. He didn't ask to. He watched her go and she let him. But for the first time, she didn't walk away afraid he would disappear. She knew now he wouldn't. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't feel like she was walking alone. The first week at the new job passed with cautious rhythm. Emma arrived every morning 15 minutes early, not out of habit, but necessity. She needed time to breathe, to shake off the remnants of sleep from the back seat of her car, to be the version of herself that no one in the office would suspect was still living with uncertainty. The law firm was smaller than the previous one, but more structured. Her responsibilities were clear, and she met them with quiet precision. No one asked where she came from. No one pried, and for now that was all she needed. Each evening, she walked out of the building just after 5 o'clock, coat wrapped tightly around her, the folder of onboarding paperwork tucked under her arm. The streets were crowded with commuters. She became one of them, not a homeless woman navigating survival, but a worker among workers, just another face in the crowd. That shift in perception, however small, gave her back a piece of herself. Nathan didn't text her during those days, not once. He had said he would wait until she was ready, and he kept his word. But she thought about him, often, at odd moments, while filing documents, while washing her face in the office restroom, while sitting behind the wheel of her car at night, the city moving past like a film she wasn't part of anymore. By Friday afternoon, the silence between them had become less like absence and more like invitation. So she messaged him, "I have an hour after work, if you're free." His response came almost instantly. "Name the place." She chose a park, not crowded, not loud, a space with benches and trees and just enough privacy to speak freely, the kind of place that didn't belong to either of them, but made room for both. He was already there when she arrived. No briefcase, no coat and tie, just Nathan seated quietly, hands clasped, eyes calm. He stood when he saw her and waited for her to sit before taking his place beside her. "How was the first week?" he asked. "Stable," she said, which is a word I haven't used in a long time. "I'm glad." They let a moment pass. The wind moved through the bare trees. Children laughed somewhere in the distance. For once, the city felt gentle. "You said something at the cafe," Emma said, "about not walking away." Nathan nodded. "You meant it?" "I did." She turned to him. "Then I need to ask something." "Anything." She hesitated. "If I fall back, if I lose this job, if something goes wrong, I need to know you're not going to disappear. But I also need to know you won't try to fix everything for me." "I won't disappear," he said, "and I won't fix anything unless you ask me to. I don't want to take your fight away from you. I just want to stand beside you while you keep swinging." She nodded slowly. "Good." Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a folded envelope. "This isn't a job offer," he said, sensing her immediate caution. "It's an idea, something I've been working on quietly for a while, and I'd like you to be part of it." Emma took the envelope and opened it. Inside were a few typed pages, concept notes, rough branding ideas, outlines of a social initiative, a non-profit. Its mission was clear: to create a sustainable support network for people living in temporary homelessness, those in transition, those falling through the cracks between emergency shelters and permanent housing. The model was structured, not romanticized. It included training, mentorship, short-term housing, a real plan. "You want to start this?" she asked, flipping through the pages. "I do." "And you want me to, what, consult?" "No," Nathan said gently. "I want you to help build it, as a partner, from the ground up. I want your insight, your voice, your perspective. I've spent too long surrounded by people who only see problems from the top down. You see it from the ground up. Emma looked down at the papers again. This is big. I know. And messy. It should be. She took a breath. You know I'm not trained in any of this. I've never run a non-profit. I'm not a strategist or a program designer. You're someone who's lived it, Nathan replied, and you know exactly where the gaps are. That's more valuable than any degree. She stared at him, the wind picking up again, the leaves skimming across the sidewalk. This could fail, she said. Most good things start that way. Emma leaned back on the bench, the envelope resting on her lap. She didn't answer, right away. She thought about the nights she had spent alone in the dark, counting quarters. The mornings she had walked into buildings hoping someone would see her as more than a burden. She thought about all the people she had met along the way, some broken, some fighting, some already gone, and she thought about what it would mean to build something real from that rubble. Why me? She asked softly. Nathan didn't hesitate. Because you're the only person I trust to get it right. Silence again. Then slowly Emma nodded. I need to finish my probation at the firm. I need to save some money, get a place of my own. Take all the time you need, Nathan said. This will wait. Emma folded the envelope carefully and tucked it into her satchel. She stood, brushing her coat down. Don't wait too long, she said over her shoulder as she started to walk away. Nathan watched her go, not with hope or triumph, but with certainty. She would return. Not because he asked, but because the idea had already taken root. And when she did, the world would look a little different, for both of them. The following weeks unfolded like pages of a story neither of them tried to rush. Emma began her new job in earnest, committing herself to every task, every responsibility. She took the probationary period seriously, not as a stepping stone, but as a test of her rebuilt resolve. Each day she showed up on time, dressed with quiet dignity, prepared and focused. Her supervisors noticed. The receptionist she once replaced on a temporary basis began asking her for advice. The office manager began assigning her tasks beyond her original job description. But Emma didn't let the progress distract her from reality. Her car was still her home. Though she had secured access to a gym with basic showers and found a better place to park near a quiet church, the conditions remained the same. The air was cold at night. The cramped space ached into her spine. Still, she endured. She didn't tell anyone at the firm. She carried the truth like a secret stitched into the lining of her coat. Nathan continued to give her space, but his presence never faded. They exchanged messages, sometimes short, sometimes thoughtful. He didn't press. He didn't visit her at work. But once a week, without fail, he sent a question. How are you really doing? Emma didn't always respond in depth, but she appreciated the question. It wasn't casual. It was a lifeline. When she did answer, it wasn't dramatic, just honest. Tired, cold, but I'm okay. Some nights when the city was quiet and the hum of traffic was distant, Emma sat in the driver's seat, with the printed materials from Nathan's proposal spread out across her lap. She took notes, crossed out ideas that felt impractical, scribbled alternatives. She wasn't just entertaining the possibility anymore. She was beginning to imagine what it would look like. Still, she made no commitments. Her focus remained on the job, on the stability she was building piece by piece. She managed her money carefully, saving every extra dollar. She stopped buying coffee. She packed food from shelters and donated pantries. Within 5 weeks, she had enough for the deposit on a small studio apartment at the edge of the city. It wasn't much, a single room with peeling paint and a faulty heater, but it had a lock, a key, a floor that wasn't the back seat of a car. The first night in that apartment, Emma sat on the floor with a thin mattress beneath her and a single lamp casting a circle of light across the wall. She listened to the silence, waiting for the usual sounds: honking, wind against glass, the creak of suspension springs under her back. But there was nothing. Just air. Still and undisturbed. She didn't cry. She didn't even smile. She simply let herself breathe. The next morning, she texted Nathan. I got a place. It's not much, but it's mine. He responded within minutes. Congratulations, when can I see it? Emma replied only with, let me settle first. She spent the next few days transforming the space, She bought a second-hand table, a blanket, a set of mismatched dishes. She patched the window with plastic she found at a hardware clearance bin. Every improvement, however small, felt monumental. It was not comfort yet, but it was distance from the edge. One evening, after 2 months of silence between them, in person she agreed to meet Nathan again. Not at a cafe or park, but at her apartment. He arrived with groceries, fresh fruit, tea, bread, and nothing else. No questions, no expectations. He stepped inside and looked around. She had placed the envelope with his non-profit proposal. On the table, beside her own handwritten notes and a list of potential names for the project. "You've been thinking about it," he said. Emma nodded. "I've been living it." He read through the pages, his brow furrowing, then relaxing, then lifting with curiosity. "You rewrote entire sections." "I did," she said. "Some of your original plans were designed by someone who hasn't had to count bus fare or talk to a shelter that's already at capacity." He smiled. "That's why I need you." Emma made tea. They sat at her small table. It was the first time they occupied a shared space that was hers, not neutral ground. The difference was subtle but powerful. He noticed it in the way she moved, in the way she allowed herself to speak more freely, more directly. They talked for hours, not just about the initiative, but about how to build something sustainable. Emma was adamant. She didn't want another organization built on inspiration with no infrastructure. She didn't want a pity-based model. She wanted something that gave people like her options, not favors. She wanted partners, not sponsors. Nathan listened, took notes, asked questions. He didn't try to steer the direction, he simply followed it. At one point, Emma looked at him and said, "If we do this, I want it to be clear. I'm not the face of anything. I'm not here to be a symbol. I'm here to build." "Agreed," he said. "And if I say no later, if I realize it's not the right time, you walk away, no guilt," he finished. She nodded. "Then let's keep going." That night, he left with a copy of her revised proposal and the quiet understanding that something real was beginning. It wasn't a fairy tale. There was no grand declaration, no rescue, just two people, both changed by what they'd seen in each other, choosing to move forward together at a pace they could sustain. And Emma, for the first time, didn't feel like she was reaching for a future out of desperation. She was building one, with her own hands. 6 months had passed since Emma Lewis first walked into the glass lobby of Carter Innovations, holding a wallet that didn't belong to her. The city had changed in small seasonal ways. Winter's grip giving way to spring, the sidewalks warming beneath longer hours of daylight, trees budding with quiet defiance against the cold months that had come before. But more than the city, Emma had changed, not through dramatic transformation, but through a steady, earned evolution. Her apartment was still small, still a bit rough around the edges, but it had taken on the shape of a home. A second-hand bookshelf stood against the wall now, filled with donated novels and binders labeled with sticky notes, operations, resources, outreach. Her job at the law firm had become permanent. The office manager had offered her a small promotion, more hours, a slightly higher wage, and the option to train new hires. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers, earned, not given. The non-profit she and Nathan had been planning no longer lived only in folders and late-night talks. It had a name, Anchor Line. Emma had chosen it. She said it sounded like something strong enough to keep people from drifting too far when the current of life tried to pull them under. Nathan had smiled when she told him, not because he found it poetic, but because it was the first time. She had used the word we instead of you when referring to the project. They had found a space in an old community building on the west side. It needed repairs, and the lease was modest but workable. Emma had insisted they use a local contractor who employed formerly incarcerated workers. She handled the interviews. Nathan handled the legal side. They worked side by side, equal voices, equal vision. Their dynamic was not perfect. They argued sometimes, not over petty things, but over real ones, budgets, strategy, timelines. Emma had strong opinions. Nathan respected them. If anything, their disagreements made the project stronger. There were no illusions between them, no one playing hero, no one pretending the work would be easy. It wasn't supposed to be. In public, they were still figuring things out. They never labeled what they had. There were moments, quiet ones, where Emma would look at Nathan a little longer than necessary, or he would bring her coffee without asking exactly how she liked it. They stood closer than they used to, spoke more honestly, but they didn't rush it. After what Emma had endured, the last thing she needed was another person trying to rewrite her life overnight. One afternoon, as they walked through the unfinished community center, Emma stopped in front of a wall that had just been painted white. She held a marker in her hand. Nathan stood beside her, waiting. She uncapped it and wrote a single sentence at eye level. "Everyone begins somewhere." Nathan read it silently, then looked at her. "That's the motto?" he asked. Emma shrugged. "It's the truth." They both knew the road ahead was long. Fundraising would be hard. Staffing would take time. The city was full of systems that resisted change, but Emma had already faced harder things, sleeping in the cold, going unseen, being treated like a problem. Compared to that, building something real felt like a privilege. Word began to spread. Former shelter clients, local non-profits, even caseworkers started reaching out. They heard about a woman who had lived through the system and wasn't trying to escape it, but to improve it. Emma insisted on one policy above all others: dignity first. Every visitor who walked through their doors would be treated like a guest, not a statistic. Coffee would be free. Names would be remembered. Needs would be met without judgment. Nathan called it radical empathy. Emma just called it common sense. They hired their first staff member, a woman named Clarice, who had been living in transitional housing after leaving an abusive marriage. Emma interviewed her personally. When Clarice asked if she was qualified, Emma had said, "You showed up. That's step one. Everything else we'll teach." The opening day came quietly. No ribbon cutting, no media, just a steady trickle of people walking through the door. Some curious, some cautious, all of them carrying the weight of lives no one else had been willing to hold. Emma greeted each one. She handed out pamphlets, answered questions, offered tea. Nathan stayed mostly in the background that day, handling logistics, but every so often he watched her, not with admiration, but with something deeper: respect, trust, something that didn't need to be spoken aloud. That night, after they closed the doors and cleaned up the space, Emma and Nathan sat outside on the front steps. The sun was setting, casting long golden lines across the concrete. "Feels like the beginning of something," he said. Emma nodded. "It is, but not the beginning most people think." "What kind, then?" She looked at him, eyes clear. "The kind that happens after you've already survived the ending." They sat in silence for a while, letting the night settle around them. No one would ever know the full story. Not really. They would see the non-profit, the smiling faces, the success stories, but they wouldn't see the woman who slept in her car through 3 winters. They wouldn't know about the moment she found a wallet and chose honesty, when no one would have blamed her for choosing survival. And that was fine, because the story wasn't about what had happened. It was about what was still possible. And for Emma, that was more than enough.